Imagine your friend calling you in the middle of the night screaming, "You burned down my house, get over here right now." Because that's exactly what happened to my friend John about 25 years ago. John actually is my first ever mentor. He is the guy who showed me the ropes back when I got my first job as an electrical engineer. He showed me how to draw electrical schematics, where to troubleshoot, how to find issues, and so on and so forth. An absolutely amazing guy. But this story dates back about 25 years ago, back when John himself was still studying electrical engineering. Back then, his friend had bought a new house, actually his first house, and he was moving into that house and was doing some renovations. And a part of that were some electrical works. And one of the jobs that he had, and he couldn't do it himself because he had no knowledge of electricity at all, was to move one socket, just like this, from the living room to a laundry room. Because in that laundry room he wanted to have a dryer, and there was just too few electrical sockets, so he just decided to move one down there, and he knew that he had John at his disposal. Because John was obviously studying electrical engineering, it should be a piece of cake for him. And John, being a good friend, obliged, got there, looked at the situation, basically saw that there were some wires on the ground he could use. He already saw that socket that he could use. So he got to work, basically disconnected some things, drilled a new hole, ran some wires, installed the socket. It was a pretty neat job, as John described it himself when he told me this story. But he was basically in and out in about 25 minutes, and he thought to himself, hold on, this was a bit too easy, but you know, it's my first time, I don't know, maybe it's how it goes normally. Unfortunately, the story doesn't stop there. His friend, about 5 days later, calls him in the middle of the night, screaming and yelling, basically accusing him of effectively burning down his house and requiring him to be there within minutes. So John obviously panicked a lot, but he got into his car and he drove over there. And indeed, when he entered the house, he could immediately smell the burning smell of electricity. So he directly disconnected all the electricity from the house and got to investigation. And indeed, when he got into the laundry room, he found this electrical socket and there were burn marks around it. So they took it off, and on the other side he saw that there were basically the line and the neutral wires were melted together, creating a short circuit, and because of the heat there was some fire that had started. And his friend was obviously pissed and John was in panic. But at that point, it really hit John of what he could have done. He could have killed his friend, basically. He could have started, and effectively already did, started a house fire. So what did John do wrong? And that's kind of the point of this video. Well, number one, whenever you're working with electricity, you always have an electrical panel that is sort of protecting different parts of the house. And in the electrical panel, you have circuit breakers like this. And the point of the circuit breaker is when the circuit draws too much current, so it goes from here through the circuit breaker down into the laundry room in the socket. If that thing draws too much current, then the circuit breaker trips and disconnects everything after it. Unfortunately, in this case, it wasn't the situation where the circuit breaker would trip, because the current that the load, which was the dryer, was drawing was actually less than the circuit breaker's rating. So in the eyes of the circuit breaker, everything was fine. And there was nothing wrong with the socket itself, because it was just a standard socket. It was exactly the same socket as what John's friend had there for quite some years from the previous owner of the house. So that wasn't the issue. The main issue was those wires that John just found on the ground laying somewhere, which he decided to run to this new circuit. They were rated for basically LED lights. They were rated for about 10 amps of current. And the problem is, when your wires are too thin, they are incapable of carrying that amount of current from the circuit breaker down to your electrical socket. So if they're forced to do so, and they were because the dryer was already running, what happens is those wires heat up over time and they start to melt off of the points where they make contact, and effectively that's when they start to create fires. And so this situation is a huge illustration of why we should always plan our work when it comes to electricity. Because electricity doesn't warn you, it doesn't give you any signals. It's also basically invisible and you cannot hear it. So if something happens, it's basically already too late. And in this case, John should have asked his friend, what kind of a dryer are you planning on using? He could have checked that this dryer draws about 14 amps of current. That's when he could have decided to use thicker wires which were rated for that amount of amperage, and nothing bad would have happened. But no, John, being obviously the know-it-all back then, he thought he already, as a student of electrical engineering, this is a silly job, and he could have, that he could just do it within a couple of seconds. And he did, by skipping a few crucial steps and almost burning down his friend's house. If you have any other ideas of what John could have done differently and how he could have prevented this situation, drop it down below in the comments. Otherwise, please stay safe when it comes to electricity, when it comes to your installations, and have a good day. Goodbye.